We are now, we're on Peripes, and today what I want to talk about is one of the most mysterious aspects of Hashkafa. And that really is an answer to the question, why is Olam Hazeh altogether? Why did Rabbi make Olam Haba first, or only? Because the key idea is, if the Rabbi, as we're learning this, wants to be native, wants to do good, fine, no problem. So make Olam Haba and be fabulous. When the Rabbi makes something, obviously it's incredible what he's going to do. We cannot even imagine what he's going to do with Olam Haba. So why not make that first, or just make that and nothing else? What do we need Olam Hazeh for?
What do we need to suffer?
Socialism doesn't
but it's
work.
more
You
than
don't
that.
want
The problem of
when you
Olam
get a
Hazeh.
handout, you're not happy.
Okay, we'll do it.
Okay. Thank you. What's the problem with Olam Hazeh? Why is that a problem? Obviously, Olam Hazeh means we have to work for it. You have to earn it. Whatever. And he's going to go into, why do we have to do that? But the problem is, if you have to earn something, the problem is that's a risk. It's a gamble. If you take a look at outside the world, you look at how much evil there is in the world. What's happening to all these people? They're all finished. You think about that. Because obviously if you have to earn something, you have to do that which is right? And then you get the reward, correct? You take a look at what's going on outside. Most of the world, I'm not saying it's evil, a large part of the world is evil, whether because they do evil to others, or they're narcissistic, they love themselves, or just do whatever they want. Whatever the idea is, a great deal of the world is not into spirituality. It's not into ruchnius. So you look at these guys, it's over for them, really, in many ways. They don't get Olam Haba. Why? Because they never earned Olam Haba. Because obviously to earn Olam Haba, future world, you need to be spiritual. You need to struggle with materialism and be more spiritual.
Look, Marshall, a Tibetan monk,
Yeah.
he only knows spirituality of Avodah Zarah.
Correct.
But he's completely spiritual. He's completely...
Yeah, but the Avodah Zarah is what kills him. I don't mean... it's the wrong thing.
I'm saying, but
Whether the wrong thing be an error in spirituality, or the wrong
Even though it's
thing
not
be a
his fault.
direction toward materialism.
even though it's not full, he just doesn't. He didn't do it.
No, I'm not going into culpability.
Uh-huh.
You have to separate the two things. For every act that is forbidden, in order to be culpable, guilty, you need to do the act, A, and B, you have to have a certain state of mind toward that act, right? And there's fundamentally 4 states of mind. You have to be aware of what you're doing. You have to know that what you're doing is wrong or illegal. Then you have to want to do the thing, it's kavanah, and then you have to do it without compulsion. You have to do it with free will. Those are the 4 states of mind that are required together with the act in order to be culpable, guilty. However, obviously, you can do an act, and if you don't have the right state of mind, if you're not aware of what you're doing, or you didn't know what you're doing was illegal, wrong, or you did not intend to do it, it happened anyway, or you were forced to do it, right? You're not culpable. You're not guilty. American law recognizes the same thing. You have to have knowledge of the deed and so on, be aware, and so on. You have to intend, premeditated, whatever it is, So therefore, I'm not talking about culpability now. I'm talking about doing the wrong thing. But in any case, so therefore the risk of Olam Hazeh is that it's risky. It's a gamble. You may not wind up in the future world. Why? Because obviously if your future world is dependent on your actions, you don't do the right actions, you don't get it. So that's a tremendous argument. Don't make Olam Hazeh. Like this, if you made an Olam Haba of the future world with all its glory, you know what I'm saying? The definition of Olam Haba, the experience is what? Infinite bliss eternally. That's what Olam Haba is really all about. It's very simple. Infinite bliss eternally. It's very simple. It's only 3 words. It's an infinite amount of bliss eternally. It goes on forever. It's not a bad place. Anyway, so therefore, but if you made the Olam Haba right away, what would happen? There's no risk, there's no gamble. You don't have to do anything. The Hashem gave it to you and that's it. So clearly Olam Haba is a tremendous risk. Olam Hazeh, is a tremendous risk.
So that means a Malach doesn't have a little
No, no, there's a difference. They have an Olam Haba, but it's not the same as one who earned it because they have Namah Ksufa. We'll get into that. You know, besides they can't grow; they're fixed. You know, we can go up and up and up. We can get different degrees of Olam Haba. They only get a certain amount. That's it. But anyway,
Does that mean that we are given it basically on a silver platter?
no, we're not. That's the problem. That's what I'm saying. If
I mean,
we were
compared to
given
people who
Olam
have to-
Haba on a silver platter, that would be great because there's no risk. In any case, the main idea here is why is there no Olam Haba first? Or only? There's a tremendous gamble in Olam Hazeh first, because you need to earn your reward. So the problem is, what happens if you don't earn it? Not only that, not only is a risk if you don't earn it, you know what I'm saying? You determine the amount, you determine the degree of Olam Haba. It's also, if the Moshe had created Olam Haba, right? There's no risk, there's no gamble, you get it, and you get all of it, whatever he wants to give. Now, not only is there a gamble as to whether you'll ever get Olam Haba, there's a gamble how much Olam Haba you're going to get, because now you determine the amount that you're getting. Got it? In which you become a filter of the amount of Olam Haba that exists. So clearly, Olam Haba is, you know, the fact that we have Olam Hazeh is very problematic. Got it? This is a real problem. Why would Moshe do that? You know, it's, and many people, you know, they have a tightness. Say, listen, you want to do it, so to give it to me now. What do I have to go through this incredible difficulty? I mean, life is an incredible struggle for everybody. I don't care who it is. It's a struggle for the infant, for the child, for the toddler, for the child, for the teenager, for the adult, for the old guy. It's a tremendous struggle. You always have, you know, and so on. And I'm not even talking about all the fears and the suffering. The suffering of mankind is incomprehensible. The amount of suffering that goes on with mankind, you know, and so on. I mean, just take a look at Sandy. I mean, one hurricane, you know. Could you imagine the suffering of that? How much suffering that produced in terms of, you know, humanity and so on, you know? It's unbelievable. We can't even comprehend that kind of suffering. Guy comes home, there's no house left. You know, it's just like, who even wants to think about that kind of thing? And so, anyway, why do this? And the suffering, of course, has a whole part in the Olam Hazeh. You know what I'm saying? That's the great mystery of, you know, and it really needs to be answered. You know, because it's, you know, if the Baal Shem is a Baal Chesed, it's be Baal Chesed. Do it now. Give me the reward now. Not reward. Give me the goodies now. You know, if you're doling out goodies, hey, I'm online. You know, what I have to go through this Gehenna, so to speak, in order to get it. That's the question. It's a very, very difficult question to answer. And in the end, there's no real satisfaction, as we'll see. You know, nobody really knows ultimately why, you know. But anyway, so this is the problem that presents itself. A very profound question, and the answer is really in many ways very elusive. Even though I'm going to try to answer it.
How would a person...
But it's very elusive. What?
If you wouldn't have to go for that, how would a person get a ticket? Okay, show them.
You know, no, you don't need a ticket. Ticket for what?
If somebody needs a ticket.
No, you understand, there's no tikkun, there's no
You would need
chitzon.
ticket.
If there's no chet, what do you kind of tikkun? You know, if it ain't broke, as they say, you don't have to fix it. If there would be an Olam Haba immediately, there's nothing to fix. You know, what do you mean? Tikkun is for something which is broken. If there's no chet, there's no sin, there's no avla, there's no injustice, there's no sin, there's no transgression, there's no violations, there's nothing. You create it immediately into an unbelievable, you know, 5-star hotel. If I can use the Hilton, you know, you're to the Hilton. You open your eyes and there you are. You're in the presidential suite in the Hilton. You know, forget about how you got there. And of course, the room service is beyond compare. I mean, every minute they're knocking on your door and saying, you know, what would you like? What would you like? You know, there's eggs in the morning, breakfast. I mean, you know, and so on and so forth. It's just, and then you open up the, you know, the balcony doors, and the view is mind-boggling. The oceans on one side, gorgeous mountains on the other, and the valleys and the hills. I mean, you can sit and describe this all day long.
But if you've
Not a
never
bad
been
deal.
anywhere else,
Wake up in
how
the
would
middle
you
of the
know?
presidential suite in the
How would you know how? If you've never been anywhere else, how would you know how great this is?
You don't think the Russian can
Because you
create
do.
you with a sensitivity of beauty
Yeah.
without having to know what darkness and ugliness is? Come on, we're talking about the Remember what I said when I talked about God? Remember,
You do it.
reality, God is not part of reality. It's not that there's a reality in which God has to take his seat, so to speak, where reality controls what he can do and so on. No. Reality is part of God. What is real is determined by the Rebbeinu Shalom. That means all the laws of existence, the fact of existence, all of that he decided and he created. Before that, there's nothing but him, whatever but him means. See? So, whatever, I mean, just, you know, put me in the Hilton. What can I tell you? You know, I guarantee everybody would love to be, you know, wow. What?
Are you going to explain Namah Super for this?
That's what I'm headed
That's
for,
what-
yes. But right now I'm telling you, you know, it's very elusive. I have never seen anybody explain anything about Namah Sufa, except the Ramchal takes it on. But as we see, it's very hard to understand. It doesn't seem to be a real answer, which we'll see and so on. Anyway, it's one of the most difficult topics in Hashkafa, and everybody seems to be shy away from it. I'll tell you right out, you know, and so on. Anyway, that's the problem, real problem. Haz is the incredible problem, you know, the struggles, and the suffering, and you know, all the deficiencies and the dependencies and everything that goes on and so on. Okay, why is this such Ilam Haz really, you know? Anyway, the answer to this is a Yerushalmi that they bring down, you know, and it says in Yerushalmi, whoever eats bread that's not his has not ksufa, shame. Namah ksufa, that's a technical term. Namah means bread, ksufa means shame, the bread of shame. What is Yerushalmi saying? What Yerushalmi is fundamentally saying is that if you are the recipient of something, right? Obviously that something has to be very good, you know, great stuff, right? If you are the recipient of that without having done anything to contribute to the reception of that, you have Namah Sufa. I mean, anything means what? That you are not responsible in any way. In other words, you didn't cause this, the good stuff to come to you, right? And you're not responsible for it. It means that somebody else caused it, but the reason why he caused it because you put him up to it, which would mean that you have a connection. Anything. You know what I'm saying? So you neither caused it, if you did not cause a state of bliss, or if you didn't, if you're not responsible for the state of bliss, right? You have this incredible feeling of shame, whatever that means.
Somebody gets a huge Yerusha, or you did nothing to get it.
A lot of people feel terrible about that, yeah. We'll go into that, because it's very profound, it has tremendous, profound psychological issues about this. The whole concept of shame, very important emotion, and it's tremendously it's minimized. People do not understand that. Well, we'll talk about it. But what is shame really and so on, as opposed to inferiority? We deal with these psychological terms. What is it? So anyway, so here's where it's appropriate to talk about this. You know, so that's Yerushalmi. So that's what Namah Sufa is. It's an experience. You could use the word feeling, but really it's an experience that arises within you. Let's call it an emotional feeling, right? In which you cannot tolerate something which is very good, but you had nothing to do with it. It's just there. That's Namah Sufa. There's a tremendous feeling of shame. I don't use the word embarrassment, I use the word shame, which is in a certain way, I think, more profound. That's what the Yerushalmi says. So therefore, what the Moshe says, okay, everybody's going to have this Namah Sufa. If I give them an olam haba, and they have done nothing to deserve it, buddy with me? If I give them an olam haba, and they did nothing to deserve it, what's going to happen? Right? They're going to sit in olam haba, and they'll be shamed all day long. Because I'm giving it to them. They didn't do a thing to deserve it. They never earned it. They don't deserve it in a sense. So it's purely my chesed. They're going to sit all day long for eternity and have an eternal shame. And it's not the way to do it. So therefore, on one side, there's a duality here. On one side, we're experiencing this incredible toiv, whatever it is. This unbelievable, what's called shefa, divine influence, which is, it's incredible. They're experiencing that, right? And the other side, they're incredibly embarrassed or shameful about this because they didn't do a thing to deserve any of this, and so on. They didn't contribute anything to this new state of being that they're involved in. And the problem is, this is an eternal shame. That's pretty bad. You know, could you imagine being eternally shameful? You know? So what's the Baruch Hashem do? This is the origin of Namah Sufa, not Namah Sufa, this is the origin. This is the problem. Wait, let me finish the problem. So therefore, the Baruch Hashem said, well, this can't be, because remember, Ramchal said that the hatova that God wants to give us has to be perfect. It has to be fabulous, more than fabulous. It has to be incomparable. That's what this has to be. Well, if I'm going to sit there and be embarrassed and shameful for eternity, this is not called hatova shlema. So therefore, you need to have a tikkun of Namah Sufa. Let's keep it simple.
No,
I'm building it up. I'm building it up, right?
The question is the same way the bunch can do everything else. You can take away the Namah Sufa too.
No, it's more than that. I take away the Namah Sufa. The question is this. Wait a minute. I don't understand. The whole reason why I feel, right, shameful if I receive something for doing nothing, who created this feeling in me? God, Rabbi Hashem. So don't create the feeling in me, right, and don't fix it. As they say, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. You know what I'm saying? Of course, now that I've got this stuff in me, it's now that the reality is such where I will experience unbelievable shame, correct? Then you're right, that I need a tikkun for this, or else it's, instead of Olam Haba being the greatest place, it'll be the worst Gehenna. You know what I'm saying? Because forever I'm having shame. So, like I say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's the problem. That is a very difficult thing to answer. So it comes out that if the Moshe hadn't created the whole sensitivity and the whole wherewithal that a person can even experience this reality, you wouldn't have to have what? A tikkun. And if you don't have to have a tikkun, guess what? The Hilton Presidential Suite. Now! This is not to be confused with an endorsement of the Hilton Presidential Suite. I mean, the Hilton is like the name in the hotels, Anyway, so this is the problem here. So we know what Namah Sufa, we know the problem if you would have created an Olam Haba first, the problems of Olam Hazeh first. Like I said, it's a tremendous gamble if you ever get anything. And even if you get something, it's you determine how much of it. So who wants this business? Skip the Namah Sufa, just give me the goodies. This is the problem. And I explained to you what Namah Sufa really is. It's this inability to receive without having done a thing that contributes to the presence of this hatova. Very clear. Okay. So we need to talk about, first of all, before you talk about Namah Sufa, you need to talk about Kisufa. What is shame? What is shame? What's the results of shame? Very profound topic. And you will see that shame determines most of our lives. It's astounding, What is shame really? What's it mean to be ashamed? Not easy, it's a very elusive emotion. But in the end, let's take an example. Let's say an example, see if we can, what's called abstract or isolate the real feelings going on. When is a person shamed? Give me an example, right? Guy goes into a shower. Here's an example. Right? Guy goes to the shower, takes everything off, right? And all of a sudden, on his way to the shower, there's this mirror. It's a common example. The guy looks in the mirror and says, I don't believe this. That's me? So it's a rather blunt description of kisufa. And also, and especially if there's another guy, standing out there, the other guy sees him, basically, al natural, whatever, and so on. He's ashamed, he's embarrassed. So we need to analyze that. And so many different, concepts, shame and so on and so forth, Or the classic is, let's say, guy's a kid, he's a 9-year-old kid, and the father says, I want you to do this, and so on and so forth, right? And the kid, whatever reason, doesn't do it because he's not sure how, whatever, and so on. And the father comes back and says, I don't understand, I told you to do this. Why didn't you do this? So the father says to the kid, which I'm giving you a real rough example, well, are you an idiot? You're an idiot. He tells this kid, you're an idiot. What are you, retarded? Something like that. I don't understand you. Why are you my child? I expect a kid that's really, this is really bad news, I'm not, but it's a good example, where the father really downgrades, abuses it, really an abuse and so on, it's terrible and so on, He really, really laces into his kid, and the kid turns beet red. What emotion is the kid experiencing? Shame. The kid is ashamed.
Same thing as embarrassment or sad?
No, well, embarrassment probably is a synonym, but shame is a better word,
Okay.
So the question again, here's another example of shame. What is shame that the kid is experiencing? So I've given a kid example, and I've given an adult example.
It's reality.
Next time, all you guys take a shower in the mikveh, and you take a look, you're all going to say, Namah Sufa, right? Okay, so the question is, what is this? And the answer is this. A person experiences shame, very important idea, when a person comes to face with his own weakness or vulnerability. He's ashamed. In both cases. Guy, like I say in the shower example, he's taking a look at his body at whatever, and so on. It's not, Mr. America, Mr. Universe, or whatever, and so on. He's fat, he's this, and all that kind of stuff, right? Wrinkles, you name it, right? He's ashamed. Why? Because he's looking at an imperfect, weak, vulnerable body. And he's ashamed, you see. In other words, what has happened is a person is exposed. He, all of a sudden, comes in contact with his own inferiority, or rather, his own vulnerability or weakness.
Reality.
Well, that's the reality. It's the exposure of one's, not fallibility, but one's own imperfection. Let me use that word, good word. When a person, when the imperfection of an individual, when he looks at it and it's exposed to him or to somebody else, either way, all of a sudden he feels shame, you see, which means that, wait a minute, something's wrong with me. It's hard for him to admit that he's imperfect in whatever way. That's what shame is. Shame is an emotion that a person experiences when he comes in contact with the reality that he's imperfect. So by the kid is ashamed. Why? Because father's giving him off. And the kid realizes that, wait a minute, maybe I'm inadequate. Maybe my father's right. Maybe I'm an idiot. Why couldn't I do this, you see? You know what I'm saying? Or, I'm incompetent, inadequate, and so on. So he feels ashamed about himself, you see. And of course, that's very destructive, because that's the beginning of the erosion of a person's sense of worth, without getting into that. But, so therefore the kid experiences shame, and the adult experiences shame. But when a person realizes his imperfection, and obviously the more he realizes about his imperfection, the worse it is. The greater the imperfection, the more shamed he is, and so on, That is the concept of shame, and so on. And it's a million other examples, and so on, So this is the concept of kisufa. Everybody got that? The question is, what does that mean? Why should a person, or rather, what does it mean psychologically? Which is the first thing I want to go into. And then we'll talk about the origin and so on. Why does a person have shame? Why does a guy have to feel he's perfect? Why? So I'm stupid, so what? Big deal. You know, you think I'm a retard? I'm a retard. So what? You know what I'm saying? So I don't have a perfect body. I don't look like Schwarzenegger. So what? What? So what? What?
Why? No, but if you...
No, they may not care about their body, but in other instances they will have shame. It's just a matter of who, you know, when, yeah, if each person has his own trigger, you know, and so on. Some guys really don't care, but but he still has shame in other instances. Nobody escapes shame. Nobody.
Because he's a Tzalanoikim.
Well, what's that answer?
I'm saying he was designed in
Nobody
perfection.
thinks about you at Solomon Kim when you're ashamed.
No, but I'm saying...
Nobody.
No, but I'm saying...
You're not saying, well, wait a minute,
Because he has
Solomon Kim, I'm ashamed.
No, but because he has...
Only a tzaddik thinks that.
So,
There you are.
There you go.
Yeah, there you are. Tzaddik
But
says,
there's an underlying thought somewhere in the deep recess of his thing that he was
How deep?
created from the Rabbi.
How deep?
He was created as being perfect in a
yeah,
certain...
but he has to have a thought in order to have shame. God doesn't think about this. A tzaddik will think about that. I'm a Solomon Kim, so therefore how can I do this Avera? And he'll be ashamed. Because he realized he just gave himself to the Yetzer Hara. He's ashamed, which is true. But in order to be ashamed in that level, you mean to be a tzaddik. Most people have no shame. You're standing in front of a mirror before you get into a shower. You're not thinking, wow, this is a Tzalmo Kim. You know, I mean, you know, you're not thinking about that. Kids don't think about Tzalmo Kim. No, it can't be that. You know, in that case, Tzalmo Kim's shame is a hoich madrega. Right? It's big, you gotta be zoichet to such a shame from such a, you know, and so on. Anyway. So the question is, what does shame produce? Okay. What is interesting about man, and it starts all the way when he's a kid. We think either we're always involved in thinking that we are God, or we want to, right? We want to be God, or we want to overthrow God. It's one of those three choices. Even though it's not conscious, all mankind, including women, have delusions of omnipotence. Yes. Me, you know, we all think we're God's gift to the planet. We may not want to verbalize that, but but deep down we all think we're omnipotent in some way. Even an infant thinks it's omnipotent. I mean, you have a 2-year-old kid talking back to its parent. You know, forget about the chutzpah, you know, whatever, but like, what does this kid think? I mean, his father is like, you know, 6.5 feet tall. And this little kid is like, what, 1.5 feet tall? And this little kid saying, no. He can't believe, like, what in the world is this kid thinking? You know what I'm saying? And the kid is incompetent. The kid's a little kid. The kid knows its own inadequacy. It's incompetent. It can't live on its own. It has no idea what to do, you know, about how to survive to the next minute. So how do you talk back to a guy, you know? So you have to look at that and you realize that part of the kid thinks it's omnipotent. Why is it we don't even think about the day of our death? You know, it's always Yena that dies. It's never us, right? You know, and so on, because we have feelings of omnipotence. We don't feel mortality because we think we're God, or we're going to live forever. There's clearly an unreality to all this. You know what I'm saying? And therefore, so man struggles with the omnipotence. What's the struggle? The struggle is this, very important. It is the central or essential psychological problem of man. Because I think I'm omnipotent, a child only begins to, so therefore what's the problem? The problem is that we have to face reality. And reality always teaches that we're not omnipotent. Because we need Yena. We need somebody else. Reality is always looking us in the face and saying, you're not omnipotent. If you were, what do you have to go make a living for? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, obviously not. So there's what's called this dilemma. You know, I am really something. I'm omnipotent, right? At the same time, you know, I need my wife, I need my job, I need my boss, I need food to survive, and so on. So reality is always smacking us in the face, so to speak. That you're not who you think you are. In fact, the child thinks it's omnipotent. But as time goes on, the child begins to learn that, wait a minute, no, I'm limited. I'm dependent, you see. And therefore, the child curbs its omnipotent fantasy that it is great and so on and so forth. And begins to realize that it is subject to others to survive and so on. But somehow the kid never gets over this, you know, and so on. And so there's always a tendency to have this incredible distorted image of self. And therefore, a man always has to contend with what? With the fact that he's not, that he's really imperfect. He is limited, he's dependent, he's deficient, and so on, by reality. This is a very big problem for a man. Now, on a psychological, you can say, well, I can understand it. Why? What's the fundamental psychological drive of all? The bottom, rock bottom. What is it?
Survival.
Very good. Self-preservation. Survival. We're all afraid of death. We'll do anything not to die. Anything. Make all kinds of decisions. Okay? Not to die. So therefore, and the Russian implanted in humans, or else, you know, it's funny, I always think, you know, if a guy had a switch, you know, switch on him, that you could kill yourself instantly without pain, how many people would be alive today? I think 80% of the Bria would have put the switch and they'd gone. You know, it was called an exit device. Right? You know, who knows, because all of a sudden you're going through a terrible tzara, and say, it's not worth it. You know, at least when I'm dead, I'm not conscious. Right? At least we hope you're not conscious, right? And so on, and just press the button, you're gone. Zap. Out. I always think that, I think maybe 5 people will be living on this planet. That's it. Everybody would have exited a long time ago.
Those would be all the tyrants.
Yeah. But see, so our problem is self-preservation. So as long as I think I'm God, I have no problem. I'll always survive, right? It's only when I confront the imperfection of reality, that's what's dangerous. Because that means I may not survive, you see. So therefore, a person, in order to compensate or to deal with the reality that says to him, you're not perfect, what does a person have to do? He always has to assert or confirm that he's somebody. That is the fundamental psychological drive of all humans. You don't realize, everything we do in some way confirms our being. We're somebody. Everything.
Is that rationalization?
What?
Is that part of rationalization?
No, the need is to avert death, right? The fear is self-preservation, right? And therefore, the compensation to that, since we all of a sudden find ourselves in a reality that's very threatening. When you meet somebody, do you know you size up the guy within 1 minute? You aware of that? You immediately, your unconscious is working. It's like a radar screen. You know, when you sit, you know, you're just blipping this guy, you're trying to read this guy. Now, why? What are you reading about him? You know what I'm saying? And the answer is this person a threat to my existence or not? That's your reading immediately. You're determining, what is this person to me? Is he a threat? Will he assist me? And so on. Immediately, why? Self-preservation. Every second of your life, every nanosecond, you're always concerned with your further existence. So therefore, you immediately shots up or estimate another person. That's why in the first minute you've already made the impression, which is not good, because then this guy has to undo. If it's a negative impression, he's got to undo it because he already made it, you know? You know, after 5 minutes, it's over with. He's figured you out, and that's the end of it. Why? Because of self-preservation. So therefore, we could say that, wait a minute, shame, or rather, the way to deal with my imperfection, the reality, is how? I compensate by doing what? That everything I do, I assert my being. everything we do. It's a very important statement and so on. Because people take different measures of this assertion. Some people go wild and they become megalomaniacs. In other words, nothing exists but me. But that's it. You find megalomaniacs where they felt that I am, and everybody else somehow doesn't exist, not literally, but figuratively. I mean, guys like, like the Mao, Deng, Yamach Shemoy V'zichor, I mean, people he killed, Hitler, Yamach Shemoy, Stalin. I mean, these are the most evil people who ever lived, They're megalomaniacs. Everything can go. Everything is irrelevant to me. That's megalomania. That is a distortion of self, which is psychotic. Then there's what's called, lower than megalomania, is egocentric. Means everybody exists, but I'm the center of the universe. Everybody exists to serve me. You see, that's really why you're here. Probably didn't know that, right? You only exist to serve me.
What's wrong with that? Sounds good.
Sounds good, huh? Means you have no value in yourself other than the fact that how useful are you to me? That's egocentric, or the ego, my ego center, you see. Then the level down is this is a very important understanding of human nature, is the egoist. Where we all exist, but I'm better than you guys. I'm superior, you see. I'm a superior being.
Is that Gaiva?
They're all Gaiva. Some of the Gaiva are psychotic, The megalomaniac is psychotic. The egocentric is, it's not psychotic, but, it is such an incredible distortion of self. It's the height of narcissism. Well, not really exactly, narcissism is different. But, and then the egoist, or the egoist and so on, where, I am and everybody else is also, but I'm superior to all you guys. We look at that as a classic Gaiva, arrogant, But then there's a fourth type of distortion of self. And I guarantee you, I don't think anybody in this room knows what it is. There's a fourth level of arrogance. It's very subtle, but it is. In fact, it's so subtle that many people are that. They have no idea that they are Baligeo, because they don't realize it's a fourth level. What's the fourth level? Self-complacency. Complacency. In other words, we all exist. I'm not superior to you guys. You guys are not superior to me. But we all exist without the need of anybody else. And therefore, I will do what I want to do. Because I exist also, so I can do whatever I want to do. You see, so it's not a matter of being superior. It's a matter of being I am. If I want to take a vacation, too bad. You know what I'm saying? When you eat, for instance, you eat and so on because I am. Therefore, I have to eat and therefore I will eat. You see, it's what's called an exercising of the self and the illusion that you exist independent of
I
God.
think therefore I exist.
No, well, that's proof they do exist.
Could you
That's they can't. But anyway,
could you
anyway, those are the four levels of Geos. Gaiva is a distortion of self. That's really what it
You're
is.
saying everyone has that.
Everybody has
could you
it. Yeah.
extend that?
Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to survive with your...
No, Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't have it. It's an avodah. The opposite. In other words, I'm giving you the four levels of arrogance or distortions of who you are. The last one is where I exist and therefore I can do whatever I want. I'm not superior to anybody else. Relative to me, everybody's equal.
I'm saying that,
However, I am, relative to God, I am independent.
but without that, I couldn't exist because of my lack that of what was the term we used before? Because I'm
Inadequate?
inadequate.
No.
You could exist without this and still feel inadequate.
I can exist and still feel adequate, you mean? I cannot have this feeling and still feel I am? Yeah. Yeah, that's called Amidus.
So where's the
Moshe Rabbeinu said, none of us exist.
But that would have to be complete uneveness. Are there levels in uneveness then?
Well, the opposite. Yeah, there are levels of Amidus too. Yes. Self-complacency is the Looks like Anivas, because I don't hold anybody else as superior. I'm not superior. So it looks like you're an onif. But really, you do whatever you want,
Right.
without the recognition at all that there's a Rebbe Shalom.
So the
That he
opposite level
made
is where
you
I consider
completely-
other people's opinions and what I do first.
What was that?
Then you're saying the opposite of that is where I consider other people's opinions and what I do first.
Yeah.
So that would be the first level of another.
Well, yeah, I'm not gonna, it's not a shen Anivas, but I'm bringing it down because ultimately I want to give it the Namah Sufa. Anyway, so the idea is that ultimately speaking, we all assert self. We're always trying to feel like somebody. Always. Like I said, because if we're not, it's the greatest imperfection, we will not survive. That's the problem. Very important. It's the most basic psychological drive of all, is the need to be self, is to have self-worth, self-respect, or self-esteem, which means that I am. And I'm not talking about
This is
Anivas.
more by men than women?
No, it's by both. Doesn't make a difference. If you're human,
So
that's what it
it
is.
starts with the threat of non-existing.
Yes,
And
sounds
therefore
like
the most basic need is to exist.
is to exist, to be. And therefore, I'm always trying to assert that. Yeah. Anyway,
So how is
now,
complacency different than assertiveness?
what?
Assertiveness and complacency, how are they different?
Because
And it's-
non-assertiveness is an aberration. It's wrong, Somebody tells you something, and it's harmful to you, or it's wrong, then you should say, I'm sorry, I disagree with you. That has nothing to do because I am somebody greater than you. It's just that, what you're saying, I disagree. It's like they say, with all due respect to your ego,
That could be
I
psychotic.
disagree,
too.
which means that we all exist, but if something is, I have to be truthful. If I assert, it's always because of some truth that I feel and that you're not in contact with. Anyway,
And the egoist, how does self-esteem play into that scenario? Someone who said, that the world kind of revolves around them in a way, maybe they could do it, they are the most important person to themselves without putting down other people. So how would esteem play into those all those
No, so
scenarios
that-
are
no, it's-
sociopathic or psychotic or...
because it's to themselves, they are the most important person, but what really is they feel they exist. They really exist in and of themselves, and they can do whatever they want. It's not so much in relation to others, yeah. Anyway, so that's the consequence of this. The consequence, but that's psychological, see. But what's interesting is this, is that a person always has to assert self, psychologically. And I'm telling you, because of self-preservation. But there's something else. Now, if a person doesn't assert himself, what happens? Or rather, if a person doesn't have this, right? If he believes he's inferior, right? Then that's very bad. Because when a person believes that that he's inferior for whatever reason, if a person has no self-worth, no self-respect, and so on, that's very bad because then he's frightened. That's the fundamental reason for anxiety.
Is that depression?
No, forget depression. A person becomes extremely anxious if he believes he's a nobody. Because, like I say, if you're a nobody, you won't survive and you'll die. So that's the immediate reason why it's very anxiety-producing. And therefore, a person will always try to remove the anxiety, all kinds of defense mechanisms, not to feel that I'm a nobody. A lot of guys walking around feeling they're nobodies, so they compensate. And so on. There's all kinds of defense mechanisms for somebody who feels like he's nobody, and so on. But anyway, the main idea is that inferiority, therefore, is not good. It's threatening to the person in his ability to survive. That's number one. However, is there a spiritual origin to this? That is the question. Is there a spiritual origin for a person feeling that he's somebody, or that he feels omnipotent? Is there a spiritual origin? Interesting question. Is it all psychological? If a kid was abused by his parents, made to feel like nobody, he will grow up feeling he's a nobody and have all kinds of psychological symptoms as a result. Why? Because that produces anxiety. And the anxiety must be dealt with by the mind. You can't be frightened all day long. There's all kinds of defensive mechanisms to allay the anxieties and so on. But the real question, that's psychological inferiority, which will create anxiety and create all kinds of defensive mechanisms. But the real question is, wait a minute, is there a spiritual inferiority? The reason why we feel inferior is not because of psychological reasons. Because of ruchnistic reasons. Interesting question. We need to look at that, you see, because that's the beginning, in many ways, of Namah Sufa. The answer is yes. We not only feel inferior, or there's something, we don't feel that we're somebody in a certain sense. It's not only because psychological reasons, but there's also ruchnistic reasons. One of them is this. Before the neshama enters the body, who are we attached to? To the Baruch Shalom. What is the neshama doing before it? Was it not created? It was. All neshamas were created at the beginning. So where's everybody hanging out? What are they doing when they hang out? That's the question. The answer is they're in a state of dvekas with the Baruch Shalom, right? The problem is that they're experiencing Namah Sufa. As I said, when you are in a state of dvekas to Baruch Shalom, you are experiencing unbelievable stuff. The problem is I didn't do anything to deserve this. I'm in the Hilton, the presidential suite, and that's how I was born, and that's the dvekas to the Baruch Shalom. You see? So that itself is an interesting position, right? So what does the Baruch Shalom do? Disconnects, so to speak, the neshama from himself, and he inserts into a physical body. That's really who we are. We are individuals or neshamas that used to be connected to Baruch Shalom, but we have been disconnected. We have been inserted into a physical world. It's like taking a spiritual being and putting it into a whole different foreign territory, and all of a sudden we open up our eyes and we say, wow, all of a sudden I feel there's something wrong. I feel inferior. I don't know why. So psychologically, like I said, because there's a struggle and so on to survive. But what I'm saying now is something different. There's a spiritual reason why. We have been disconnected from the source of existence, who is God. He's snapped us off, so to speak, and put us into a goof, and the goof now covers everything. It distorts or changes our perception of reality. And now we're no longer connected to the source of existence. We have been disconnected. See? So therefore, immediately we have this sense of inferiority, which means that, hey, I'm nobody. I'm zero. So there's a reason why you're feeling like zero. Because you have been disconnected from the Baruch Shalom. So as long as we were connected, we were feeling this incredible state of existence. But when we get disconnected, all of a sudden, who are we? Is there something here? You know what I'm saying? So that's a spiritual reason for inferiority. You see? So not only psychologically we can feel inferior, we can feel inferior existentially. Because the way we exist automatically gives us a feeling of inferiority. We have been disconnected from the source of existence. And immediately, it's like an infant, right? Imagine an infant that the mother's holding, So the infant feels great. All kinds of tactile, when the mother touches a very important emotion, very important, touch and so on. And the infant is being hugged by its mother, and the infant feels great. Because that touching reinforces the fact that it is something. You see, somebody is hugging me, so I'm secure, I can make it because somebody's hugging me and so on, And all of a sudden, the infant is put down and the mother walks out, and all of a sudden the infant feels, hey, what happened to my support system? It's gone, and all of a sudden there's an anxiety in part of the child. Some kids need to be hugged all the time. You put them down, they start screaming, Why? Because they have a greater feeling of insecurity, or rather inferiority, or so on. But what I'm saying is that the fact that the neshama has been inserted into a physical body immediately produces an existential state of inferiority, which automatically produces a fear. It's an existential fear that you're now disconnected from the spiritual source of existence, which is, of course, the Baruch Shalom, and all of a sudden there's a tremendous fear. And then the child is always trying to overcome that, you see. So it comes out interesting that psychologically we feel nobody, and spiritually we feel like nobody. So it comes out that both of these are feeding us to a certain being. You see? Part of us is trying to feel like somebody because spiritually our neshama feels, oh, I'm nobody. I've been disconnected from the source. And therefore the person's always trying to do what? To try to reassert being. And we are forever trying to do that. Everything we do, we're always aware of who am I? I'm somebody, and you better find out. and so on, And because of those two origins, psychological and spiritual. Okay, so far we have an understanding. See? So we understand the concept of shame. All of a sudden we're walking by and we see this mirror and what do we look like, So we're shamed because all of a sudden there's a vulnerability we see in us, and that reinforces our inferiority. Uh-oh, I'm imperfect. Uh-oh, there I go. So shame is the emotion when what's exposed to you is weakness, vulnerability, and that becomes threat. You see. But shame, spiritually, is different. Psychologically, that's the origin of shame. It's a very important emotion, because then we try to overcome that shame. What about spiritually? See, why do we have shame? Interesting. Now, I told you why. I told you one reason, because we're disconnected from the Rebbeinu Shalom. And we're inserted into a physical world, and God is gone. I mean, we don't see him, and all of a sudden the Shema, it's a pachad. It's an existential fear, you see, and therefore there's a drive to compensate for that, or to overcome that, and that's part of the drive to assert being, to feel like somebody. But there's another reason. It's very interesting. And that all has to do with the concept of Hatova Shlema. Do you remember last week I ended, the Ramchal says Hatova Shlema, that the bunch wants to give us the best. So remember I asked you, if God came over to you and said, okay, I like you, one wish, genie, one wish, and I will grant it to you. And everybody was trying to, money, this, that, whatever, so on, But I think I left you with the answer. The greatest of all wishes, what? I want to be God. I want to be you. Or at least like you. Okay, so, you can also exist, God. No problem. But I want to be you. So the Moshe would say, and you're right. You could say to Moshe, listen, you want to give me Hatova Shlema, which is the greatest possible good. The greatest possible good is to do what? Not to be dependent, to have no limits, to have no deficiency, to exist forever. Come on, that's it. There's only one being that's God. There's nobody else that has that type of characteristics or profile. Right? So make me a God. Wow. That's incredible. You see? And therefore, you could say, you want to give me a Hatova Shlema, make me a God. What did the Hashem say? I will do it. I will make you a God. Because that's Hatova Shlema. What I'm trying to show you is something very interesting. That's exactly what the Hashem wants to do. He wants to make us into a God. Interesting, huh? But there's a problem here.
You can't read.
What?
You can't read. It's only one.
What's the problem? What? It's not that. I mean, we think that God can't do it because, he's, Eino Movado, etc., without getting into all that and so on and so forth. There's a big problem here. There's an existential impossibility for me to be a God, even though that's the best thing of all, you see. So what the Hashem did is very interesting. And here's where the beginning of the problem is. The Hashem said, okay, what I'm going to do is in many ways make you a God. In what way? Okay. One of the incredible features about the Hashem is what? Because the Hashem, you want to say something? Okay. Because the Hashem is not limited, he's not dependent or deficient on anything. He's a self-made, I don't want to use the word man, but he's a self-made being. And we don't understand how or what and so on. So the Hashem says, okay, one of the essential ideas of this type of being is the Hashem is a noisein, not a makabel. That's what it means. The Hashem is not limited, right? So he doesn't need anything else to take away the limitation. He's not dependent on anything, and he has no deficiencies. So the Hashem is completely independent, right? So therefore, he's a noisein. The Hashem doesn't have to take from anything, but he can give. The problem with us is we need to take. We're a makabel, because we are not God. So we are not a noisein, we're a makabel. This is the problem, you see. So what the Moshe does is, in a certain sense, although it's not clear how, but the Moshe makes an neshama that's a chelik l'kaimal, that's a part of God Himself. Now, we do not understand what that means at all, but what it does leave us with an interesting duality. Since we are chelik l'kaimal, we are part of the living God, right? What does that mean? That means we are divine. Really divine. Because, if something is a chelik of something, right, then it's divine. So therefore, in that sense, we're noiseh. We're not a makabel. But at the same time, we're a nivra, you see. So in a certain way, we're a nimtza. We are God in a certain sense. But we're a peculiar kind of God. We're a nivra. We were created. We didn't always exist. So the part of us that's a nimtza is not a makabel. It's a noiseh. The part of us that is a nivra is a makabel, not a noiseh. Because a nivra means you are dependent for your existence on something else. The proof of that is that we didn't always exist. So here you have a being that has both. That feels as if it's God, which means it's not a makabel, doesn't receive anything. On the other side, right, we know we receive. That's how we exist. So it's very hard for us to be sovel this. How does a being that feels it is God and it begins to look at its imperfections?
This is a created no sin, and that's stira. Based on.
Well, like I said, the concepts itself are very difficult to precisely understand because we don't know what's involved. What does chelik l'kaimal really mean? What does that mean? I mean, part of God. God isn't anything except God cannot be individuated into parts. You know what I'm saying? But in any case, the neshama is a peculiar kind of being. On one side, it's Elokim. In the end of davening, it says, Atem Elokim Atem. You are gods. Where the neshama is Chelik HaMimal, so it's a nimsa. It feels it is a divine being, and it is in many ways. At the same time, it's a divine being that was created, so it's a makabel. So it's interesting you have this kind of duality here in the neshama itself, you see. So here's the problem. Why did the Hashem do that? Because he wants to make the neshama a god. That was Hatova Shlema. You see? So the fact that the neshama is a chelik l'kaimal is the concept of Hatova Shlema. That's why. It's the greatest thing God can do for you, and that is if you can't be a god, so you're a chelik of God. So that automatically gives you a feeling of what? Of omnipotence. You see, of superiority or omnipotence. That's where our feelings of omnipotence comes in. That's why an infant has omnipotence until it learns that it is not a nimsa, it's a nivra. It's got to receive from its parents and so on. So the neshama is a peculiar kind of being. So the Hatova Shlema demands that it's a chelik l'kaimal in the greatest possible way. At the same time, it was a nivra because it didn't always exist. So the neshama has this. So here's the problem. This is the origin of Namah Sufa. Because the neshama feels like a god, so if the neshama is noinam habo, receiving, it's forever what? Experiences its vulnerability. That's shame. The shame isn't that it's shameful, it's embarrassed. The shame, as I told you, the definition of shame, it experiences its imperfection from nanosecond to nanosecond for eternity. That's terrible. Why? Because since it has the feelings of omnipotence, the feeling that it is a God, it's constantly experiencing, I'm not a God. So, come on. It's the Hatova Shlema created the concept of Chelik l'kaimal, which creates the concept of what? Of I feel omnipotent, which creates the concept of Namdik Sufa shame. Because if I'm in Olam Habo and it's not a God, really I'm always experiencing God, whatever that is, so that's a makabel. So the fact that I have to be makabel from the Rebbe Hashem, at the same time I feel as if I'm a noisein, is Namdik Sufa.
But if
Got
that's
that?
in a positive
So
way.
the origin of Namdik Sufa originates in what the Ratzon HaBorei is. you're right, I want to make you God. That is Hatova Shlema. So therefore, you're going to be a chelik or a kamimal, whatever that means. But what it does is it elevates the being that is a chelik to an incredible status, unbelievable status, that it is God-like, which means that I'm an oiseh, not a makabel. I'm not dependent on anything, because that's the peculiarity of a God. At the same time, since you created me, and you need to feed me the existence from microsecond to microsecond, you know what I'm saying? I feel terrible. I feel imperfect. So that kind of a situation, Olam Haba, is Namnik Sufa. That means at the same time I'm feeling I'm incredible, at the other same time I'm feeling like a shlamazel. I mean, not shlamazel I should say, but I'm a nobody. How does a being exist that way? So we on earth, we're always compensated and always trying to prove we're somebody. So in Olam Hazeh, you can do that kind of business. You know, we're always trying to feel with somebody, and that's why we always have to assert, who are you to put me down? You know, there's always the need to, no, and I'm somebody, you know, and so on. All arguments, all desires to be remembered eternally. Why does a guy give $1 million to have a plaque on a wall? What does he care if anybody remembers him? Who cares? You know, you think anybody remembers him after the plaque? I have yet to see a guy who looked at a plaque when he walked to a building. You know? But it's the illusion of being immortal. So at least if I'm not here, at least they remember me. Yeah, sure, right? Although your grandkids remember you. Forget about the plaque on a wall. You know? That's what's in there. But, you know, I see these people, you ever go into a shul with the Yortzeit plaques, you know? Like you walk into shuls, I once walked into a shul, the whole shul was plaques. Well, obviously everybody had an inferiority complex. I mean, everybody wanted to remember forever. You tell me who looks at the plaque. I used to actually look at some of the plaques because I was curious. How far back does the death go? And the guy's dead for 80 years. That shows how old the shul was. So I was curious from a historical standpoint, you know. But nobody looks at plaques on a wall, you know. But it's man's obsession with being remembered forever. You see, you know. I remember once there was a shul that was, you know, it was a bad neighborhood, it was going to close and so on, you know. So they made a deal, so they had money saved up, let's say, you know, 200 grand, you know, so they're going to give that to another shul to perpetuate the memory of that shul. But what was part of the deal? You got to take all the plaques, right? Got to put it on the wall there, you know, it's like, anyway, because all these people want to remember it forever, Seich and Neshama, and so on. It's incredible what a person does to think he'll live forever, which of course he doesn't, you know, and so on. Anyway, but this is the existential problem for the neshama. He's a nivro and an imsa at the same time. Those are two conflicting ideas in the same individual. So therefore, in Olam Haba, where a person feels he's God in a certain sense, at the same time, he's being makabel from the Basham, all the hashpah, terrible. And therefore, he's always being reminded, so to speak, of what? That I'm a makabel, that's kisufa, that's shame on a spiritual level. You see, the inability to receive is kisufa. In this world, the kisufa manifests itself as shame, when you're reminded of your vulnerability. You know, in the Namah, the kisufa is what? Is to feel terrible, to see your imperfections eternally, which is beyond belief. So you see how it goes. The Hatova Shlema demanded you be like God. Chelika Kamimal, Nimsa Nivra, Namdik Sufa.
But isn't that conflict necessary as an impetus and thrust to want us to try to grow and make those come closer to each other?
Wait. So what does Moshe say? I need to massacre this. See, the question, why did Moshe just dump this problem of what does he have to fix it for? Don't give us the feeling of shame.
Right.
But the answer is we have the feeling of shame because we're chelik lekamimal. So what that means, if he didn't make us chelik lekamimal, we would always feel we're a makabel. We would have the shame.
We would never have shame.
No, because we are makabel. What's the problem here? The shame comes from the fact that we think we're God and we're perfect. So we're always reminded of the fact that we're imperfect. That's the shame. Just like a human, when he sees himself as deficient. So he's immediately what? Shame, because I feel I'm perfect. I'm taking a look at myself and what is this? You see what I'm saying? So therefore, Namlik Sufa is the result of a being that's a chelik l'kamimal. You got it? And therefore is the closest thing to the Bar Shalom. Got that? That's the Kisufa. You see? On that, the spiritual Kisufa is because we're Nimtza besides the Nivra. See? And that manifests itself here. Besides the psychological concept of self-preservation. You know, wait a minute, if I'm imperfect, that means I can die. That's a psychological concept, right? Of self-preservation and so on, the need, right? But the real concept, right, is I think I'm God. Why? Because I think I'm God, I'm an neshama. You see? And even a goy has a neshama, just different levels. But all beings that have neshamas will have namlik sufa, which is interesting. And I think even malachim have namlik sufa, because they're extremely elevated and so on. Their problem is they never always have namlik sufa. Number one, and so on. There's no tikkun for them. But the thing is that they don't grow more and more. They get whatever shefa comes in Ilam Haba, they get a certain amount, and that's it. We, however, have to do the tikkun because we can grow in the shefa. The amount of glory of God that we experience grows from second to second. That's where, therefore, any day in Ilam Haba is not the same as the next day. The next day is incomprehensible to the first day, which is incomprehensible to the day before. We can't even imagine what that is, you see. And therefore, we need a tikkun. What's the tikkun? We have to imitate God. In some way, we have to be a noisein, not a makabel. That's its tikkun. So therefore, God creates an olam hazeh. We come down, right? And therefore, we have a job to do. We will create the exact amount that we will need, right? That we get in Olam Haba, the future world.
Well, that's staggering. Can you compare it to our little chakras?
Wait. No. So therefore, we need to come down, and whatever hashpah we get from God in Olam Haba, the future world, we are responsible, we cause it. And therefore, in essence, we are a true cause of whatever we get in Olam Haba, and therefore we're not a makabel, we're noisen because we determine the fact that we are there and the degree that we get. So to that extent, we are noisen and not a makabel, so therefore the kisufa is enormously alleviated. Even though, in the end, we need to exist from God. I mean, what we're getting in Olam Haba clearly is not us. It's what we determine is the fact that we're in Olam Haba and how much we get. That's all we can determine. We are Baal HaToivahu. But the actual Toiv, clearly, we're not. But as long as we in some way have that we determine the amount we get, that's enough to remove the Ksufa. So if you're a total makabel, that's bad news. But if in some way you caused or are responsible or contributed truly to your matzav, your situation in Haba, to that extent your kisufa is gone. And that's apparently, the Baruch Hashem knows, that is sufficient to be makabel, which we are, in Olam Haba, because we know that if it wasn't for me, I would never get this. In other words, whatever I'm experiencing is a result of my input, nobody else's. But in order to do that, the Baruch Hashem has to do something incredible. What is that? So therefore we know why there's tikkun of kanam d'ksuf in Olam Hazeh. That's why you need an Olam Hazeh. So the nivra, or the nimtza, doesn't feel in shame because it's a nivra. Interesting. But in order to do that, what does God have to do?
Has to pun.
Who?
Yes, it has to pun.
Yeah, in order to make an Olam Hazeh, but there's something far more important. Far more important.
Okay, yeah.
We have to be a true cause, don't we? God's going to give it to us anyway, isn't it? It's not a game.
Here.
Oh, free will. That necessitates the creation of free will. Because free will means what? Whatever we do is our decision, not his, which itself is a very problematic idea, and so on. That means we are a true cause. A true cause, or we are truly responsible for the fact that we are in Olam Haba and the darga of Olam Haba we're in. That's bchira, free will, which is a very problematic concept. But how do we know we have free will? Because it says in the Torah, "Ubachata b'chaim." Wait a minute, that means we have a chiyur, the whole thing doesn't make sense, right? So that's how we know that we have true free will, and so on. And therefore, what that enables us, it gives us true causality. We are true causative agents for the fact that we are in Olam Haba, future world, and the level of heshbor that we get in Olam Haba. So that's the solution.
Yeah, but then where does all this come in with
Now,
let's say,
the problem with all of this, and that's why this is nice, but it's only after God created the world. But remember, ultimately the problem is, wait a minute, reality is part of you. Why create any of this? Why create the concept of Hatova Shlema, perfect goodness?
I don't know.
Wait, I'm just saying what the problem is, it's the concept of Olam Haba, the concept of a Nimsa, or a Nivra. These concepts were created, right? The concepts of being, of Chelik Lekai. Why even do any of that? It just created another type of reality where none of this exists. Unknown. There's no answer for that, because we don't know why God decided this. And but you see, once you have the given of A, B, C, D, E, F, G follows. But if God is the absolute controller or determiner of reality, why do this reality altogether? Unknown. So ultimately speaking, Nam Diksufa has no answer, really. But once he did that, so we can, at least we have a logic, or else guys don't even have a logic here, don't make it, and denying them a logic here. But it comes out of Merditzach that the whole concept of bread of shame comes from the fact that God wants to make us God. And that's what the Nachash said to Chava. Visem Elokim, you'll be his God. Wow. Because man aspires to be God. And in the end, the incredible thing is, we will be like God. Ultimately, in Olam Haba, like him, a me'ain of God. So it's funny, by listening to God and not trying to rival him, right, we will be like God. It's a paradox.
Nachash was telling them the opposite of what was true.
Exactly. But if you want to be like God because you want to do what you want to do, then on the contrary, you won't be like God. It's a paradox. To try to be like God, right, by rivaling him, you will not be like God. It's only when you accept your humility, which is a paradox, then you'll be like God. But if you're arrogant and you insist on doing what you want to do because you're somebody, then you think you're God, but you won't be God. It's the reverse. So by being humble, you will be God. By being arrogant, you will not be God. And that's the Nachash. See, the Nachash understood exactly what Adam and Chava needed. The insecurity of being separate from God, and the fact that the Nivra was bothering them. They understood that, because that's why he's the Malch HaMavis. And that was his temptation, you see. And that's why throughout the Chumash, everybody's always trying to prove themselves. And it starts off with Adam, Chava, she's the first one, then Adam, right? Then you have the Tower of Babel, Migdal Bavel, these guys trying to overthrow God, right? Cain and Hevel, Migdal Bavel, you know what I'm saying? And all the Avimelech, it's not the Korach. Everybody's trying to get a chance at being God, or saying, hey, I'm somebody. You know what I'm saying? It's a constant state of affairs where a person is always trying to assert because of his inferiority, whether it be psychological or spiritual inferiority. So, there you are. That's the Shir Lamitzu. Wow. So you now know what it is and what we really ultimately can't answer. But you understand the logic. The whole logic comes from Hatov Shlema, which is really fascinating. Which is the original question. If you had one wish, what would you wish? And so on. Before we leave, that's it. Hello, Eliezer? Want to shut that? Ultimately speaking, like I said, why one person can... Anyway.
Rabbi Kessin, one quick question. This whole thing is like essential, it's the core.
What's the core of the tikkun?
But I always keep thinking, I have a hard time with this. The overwhelming majority of Yidden that come to Earth never have a chance at Torah Judaism. So what's that about? So they're just banging around like pinballs on a pinball machine.
No.
Looking for
No,
the answer.
everybody has his avodah. Everybody has his job. But you don't understand what the job is. You think the job is to have complete bechira. No. There's a range of bechira. Nobody has complete bechira.
Is that a Tesla?
Nobody has
It's not
complete
doing all the
bechira.
basics. Not because they turned it away, Constable. They never went to
because-
yeshiva. They don't know. They were raised
Because what their Gilgul demands, what their reincarnation demands, is this is what they have to do.
Oh, okay.
It depends on their former lives. You
You
know,
really have to look at every Yid as
Each
a brother,
Jew-
whether they're religious or not, or whatever.
no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about each Jew has his work mission in life, which depends on his former lives. You see? So what you may say, well, this guy has no bechira, he doesn't need the bechira of that.
He doesn't do
He just
mitzvah.
has to do one thing and that's it. See, the journey of the soul as it migrates from life to life determines its mission and what it did in the previous. So sometimes the neshama does not have to do everything it did when it first came down. You see? But anyway, that's the concept of the mystery of the soul, who it really is, and so on, the consciousnesses and so on. This is what's very interesting about this.
Maybe it's just my misunderstanding of what it is, but it seems that like Torah and mitzvahs for an existence to be of such an entity that's mamish just, let's say, a step down from God. The Torah mitzvah seems like a small price to pay, so to speak,
I mean, it's very little. Yeah, that's true.
for an eternity's worth,
Yeah,
like a
no,
little
that's-
70 years.
That's if you you think that's the problem. So I have a whole share on that. It's called the Chesed of God. What is the Chesed of God? What you mentioned is one of them. You know, it's like the Vilna Gaon said before he died. You know,
For the tzitzis.
tzitzis. He picked up his tzitzis and he said, "You mean I'm going to get Oyim Haba for this? I mean, what does it take to wear tzitzis? We're not even aware we're wearing tzitzis. You know, we put it in the morning, whatever, makes rock or whatever, and so on and so forth. And then we forget about it until the night time, we just take it off. And for that mitzvah, who knows what the reward of Oyim Haba is? See, so that's the
So it
incredible
feels like
thing.
I'm not doing like heavy labor to earn an eternity of being godlike. No.
Don't say anything, because Rabbi Moshe said, you know, he's got a point there. I got to get a much harder job. Obviously, that's
This is
not
actually-
the word. But no, you know. But I want to tell you something. Don't worry. I guarantee the Moshe makes up for that. Because the nisyonis we have, you know, we may not have any nisyon in tzitzis, but in something else, they'll be terrible, you know. Don't worry about it. We have to earn our keep, as they say, you know.
Right.
So there's plenty of difficulties and so on. But that is one of the chasodim of the Moshe. That overall, you know, look, they used to say, Shvetz is Yid, it's hard to be Jewish. They didn't obviously feel that way, you know, and so on. You know, each generation has its struggles, its difficulties, and so on. In Europe, they had no money. You know what I'm saying? Everybody had to, you know, they had no money and so on. Everybody had to work for a terrible amount of hours and so on and so forth. It was very hard then after you wiped, you sit down to learn Torah. That was their nisayon. Each generation has their own nisyonis, their own struggles. You know, it's like never, nothing is uniform. Every generation has its own struggles, its own mission, and therefore its own tikkun. And through the entire journey of the neshama, through all the lifetimes, you know what I'm saying, it will have struggled sufficiently.
That's a chesed.
But even then, it's never the same, right? It can never justify infinite bliss forever. Claw, nothing can justify that. And that's one of the chasodim.
But
You
that
know.
means that there's still a tremendous amount of non-disik sufa, theoretically.
No, because whatever
It's
I
contributing.
get,
Contributing.
I contributed. That's
Oh, so
all.
at least that.
No, that's all
what
we
Rabbi
get.
that's what Rabbi was saying. The hatava itself of eternal bliss forever, that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Yeah.
But what we get, at least we did, and that's
The
enough to
fact that we
mitigate.
get, and the fact that what we get, we caused, truly, because we had Bechira, that is sufficient to enjoy Olam Haba forever and not have this
Is there
conflict of-
is there an undercurrent, like, it's enough to mitigate it, but is there like always an undercurrent of Lamaisa is always
They can't
pure
be,
chesed?
because it's not
But it won't be
Hatova.
shlema, so
It's not
somehow I
Hatova.
should
If there's if something is gnawing at me for eternity, then, I really deserve this. I don't know what I really do. I want to tell you something. That Olam Haba will turn into a Gehenna. I don't care how minute it is. You ever see a little flea buzzing around your head? And you're able to do work and so on and so forth, but come on, this flea is always there. So it obviously, look, the Moshe is not going to do that to us. It has to completely remove.
so
the kisufa.
somehow
Somehow it does.
It does.
But because they have to say that the kisufa isn't the fact of how much we feel like God. It's the fact that if we receive it in the Namah, we never feel like God. So to remove anything automatically removes the problem. Got it? The kisufa comes from the fact that we are complete makablam. Really.
So
as long as we know that there's some aspect of the Kabbalah of receiving,
So in that direct thing,
give what's gone, and so on, So
in that respect,
yeah,
I'm God-like. That's enough.
that's enough, yeah. In other words, as long as I'm somewhat godlike,
That's what I can hang my hat on. So.
yeah, then that's fine. The problem is that as long as we're not a cause, we never feel like a noising. Never. It's always a macabre. Oh, we're receiving that which we don't deserve. That's intolerable.
That removes the kisufa because Lamaisa in this Indian, I'm gonna give it.
And that's enough.
That's enough.
Yeah, I gotta feel like
It's like,
I'm
it's like when you
God
turn
in some
on,
way.
Right.
It's like when you turn on the switch.
What?
You turn on the switch. You don't generate electricity to let it come in, but you cause it in a sense.
You have to cause it, yeah.
It's like you turn on the switch. You have nothing to do with electricity. It's coming from a station, and all
Yeah,
the whatever.
but my cause is I
Right,
put
but I
this
question
question,
it.
and that's enough. I'm okay. I
It's
can
good.
now
It's good.
enjoy
It's
it.
good. It's a good martial problem.
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, do Chazal or maybe Ramchal talk about this game of consciousness, because you're saying that really there is something fishy there. At a certain point, we have to feel that we are all one and we are part of.
It's one of it's a very difficult, profound topic of who is who and what is what.
Well, this consciousness.
Who, like I said, Adam Rishon, as I say, I'll just repeat it, this had Adam Rishon not done the chet. The question is, would we have been created or born anyway? And the answer is yes. Every neshama would have been born, created, because we're all part of Adam Rishon.
Right.
So the problem is, wait a minute, I'm not Adam Rishon. You're not Adam Rishon. How come in one man, you cannot divide consciousness. It's indivisible. So the question is, Adam Rishon he had consciousness wherever he was. It's not me. So when he did the sin or whatever, if he did the mitzvah, I didn't do the mitzvah, so I should have felt nam d'ksufa. I should feel the bread of shame. But somehow, the mystery is that all the neshamas are really one block. It's called a uniform block. What's the term? It's a unified block. What's it called?
one body, one entity.
No, but there's a,
And what Jung said,
I
collective
forgot the
unconscious.
term. Forgot the term for it. But anyway, somehow individual consciousness don't really exist. We think we exist individually. Because, I look at you and you look at me and say, well, you're not me and I'm not you. But in a certain level, we are the same consciousness. So really you're looking at yourself.
You said consciousness
I'm looking
can't
at you.
individuate.
Consciousness cannot
So then
individuate.
how do you have me and you?
Well, that's the mystery. I don't know.
But
But if you think about something, I want to tell you something. Everybody has a certain sense of identity, yes? Well, what determines an identity, really? What are you conscious of? Consciousness simply means to be aware of something.
Oh, the history. What happened in my life?
You're conscious of what? It's your memory. Means, what is your experiences previous?
Oh, so if one day joined.
What are your skills, talents? You know what I'm saying? Who are your relationships? In many ways, that's who you are. But what happens if I erased everything? Imagine if you had total amnesia. Who would you be?
Nobody.
Well, would you be me? Because you don't have a separate identity.
it's like old
See, that's an interesting concept. What creates a separate identity, really?
We're talking
It's
about
really-
information. It's basically some body of information.
Well, it's all the experiences and who.
Well, what's going to happen to each individual consciousness
Well,
on some level?
well, apparently.
Are they all going to disappear? Or
No, that can't be. I mean,
Right.
it doesn't make sense, you know.
They'll just
No,
intertwine somehow.
There will be individual consciousnesses, each one experiencing Olam Haba, yet in a certain level it's an identicality. We do not
It'll be like
understand
Siamese
that.
twins. In some way, will be joined, but
We'll
be
individually.
we'll feel the Arabim or whatever it is.
Exactly.
They're going to
It's a
intertwine.
great mystery of who is the neshama. How many neshamas really are there? Are there really separate neshamas? Are there separate consciousnesses? Or are we really the same person looking at each other? You know, it's like a mirror. I look into the mirror and the mirror looks back at me, except the mirror has no life. But imagine, but it's really me.
So you're talking to yourself now, basically.
Basically, I'm talking to myself.
And the bottom line.
When people
So
do
you
that,
give the share next week, because what's
Yeah,
the
you give the
given?
share next week.
What's the given to be talking to
When
them all?
people
You're
do
really
that-
talking to us.
when people talk to themselves and they think there's somebody there, it's usually some type of schizophrenia, you know, so. Right? You know, and so on. Anyway, a lot of stuff. And okay, well, at least we have a handle on some aspects.